Vad vet ni om Natura 2000?
Ingenting.
Visste ni att det här området var ett Natura 2000-område?
Nej.
Har ni hört talas om Natura 2000 förut?
Nej.
Kan ni gissa er till vad det kan vara?
Ja, det handlar väl om... Och så Natur 2000?
Natura 2000.
Natura?
Ja.
Nej, jag vet inte. Det kanske om att skydda naturen här runt omkring. I Nackareservatet.
Påvisa naturens värden.
Vad vet du om Natura 2000?
Om Natura 2000 vet jag inte ett dyft.
Visste du att det här området här är ett Natura 2000-område?
Nej, det visste jag inte. Jag vet att det är en naturreservat, men jag visste inte att det var just ett Natura 2000. Nej, det visste jag.
Hela
Nej,
Sverige.
det är EU som har
Jaha, det är EU. Ja. Då
EU-nivå.
borde man nästan ha hört det lite mer kanske.
This is the Silicate Steep in Hellasgården, an environment close to the inner city that offers wonderful nature to hike in or just admire the breathtaking view. The setting consists of beautiful woods, deep lakes and unique species. But how is it so that this environment is so well preserved? Because it is protected by Natura 2000, a nature protection directive created by EU to inhibit the extermination of species and habitats.
Natura 2000 is a network within EU that works towards the protection and preservation of the biological diversity. Areas in which have been classified as valuable from an EU perspective should be included in the Natura 2000. They are then classified as areas with certain protection and preservation values. The areas need to have a preservation plan that points out the natural values and should describe what is needed to preserve the area in long-term perspective.
There are some territories in Europe that the European Union wants to maintain for future generations. So this particular Silicate Steep has been classified by the EU to be a part of the Natura 2000 areas around Europe because it is a place they have decided to preserve. But are all these steeps silicate? And why is just this one so important to maintain? There is obviously some particular things that make this place into what it is. Usually you talk about T, typical, and C, characteristic species that make this place into a silicate steep. A T species is a typical species for this specific area, which makes it important to maintain. And a C species is species for every silicate steep. If there are a lot of species, it becomes an issue for the European Union. But there is no criteria for a steep to become protected. In fact, there is no saying how many species there have to be for it to become a Natura 2000 territory.
When we were on this very steep, we were able to find a couple of species that make this area into what it is. One on the steep, we found a couple of mosses and lichens, ferns and other herbs. Down by the waters, we find a couple of coots. Some swing way out on the lake, others were by the reed. Coots are classified as both T and C species and works as indicators for natural lakes rich on species. Coots is to be found in base lakes rich on vegetation, such as redbeds and water vegetations. Because the water runs from Söderby Lake to Dammtorps Lake, the biggest part of nutrition is located there, in the base of the Dammtorps Lake, which is where we find the coots. Another species that we found, this time on the steep, is steep sorrel, a sea species that is very common all over Europe. Apart from the steep sorrel, we also find a spring sporgle, classified as both T and C species.
The purpose of Natura 2000 surroundings is to uphold a favorable conservation for all the species and habitats that are specific to that area. To make sure that the area is actually being preserved, the landowners have set up some preservation goals that the municipality works towards. Once in a while, the landowners inspect the area to control that all the T species are remaining and to make sure no further measures have to be taken. The preservation goals are mainly about maintaining the naturally eutrophic lakes and the rich vegetation at the silicate steeps. Due to the Natura 2000 protection, authorization is required to start any businesses that might affect the environment, and it is not allowed to build new buildings in the area. The landowners regularly work with keeping the lake naturally eutrophic. They keep an eye on the leakage of chemicals and ensure that the level of phosphorus and nitrogen in the lake doesn't grow. Reed gets cleansed every now and then so it doesn't cover up more than 50% of the lake. Also, in 1979, the legislation surrounding dredging became more strict to prevent the harm it could make to the biological system of the lake. Today, the municipality gets rid of the dredged material afterwards and thanks to that there is no risk for turbidity of the water in Ältaån. It is also important that the water levels differ during the seasons because that favors the lake's vegetation. During the summer season, it is supposed to be a low tide to allow a rich vegetation to develop even at deeper lake bottom. And to keep the vegetation at silicate slope, forestry has been forbidden in the area because it could have a negative impact on sensitive tea species. Also, dry wood is saved at the slope because it is a perfect home for many insects.
A national park has a minimum size of 1,000 hectares and it has to be defined by a couple of characteristics, which include the ecosystem must not be altered by human exploitation and occupation, where the species and habitats are of recreational, educational, or scientific value. That the highest authority of the country has taken action to preserve the nature and prevent human exploitation of the whole area, and that visitors are allowed to enter and enjoy the beautiful nature. National parks are owned by the government, which gives them the power to move companies out of the area, and they are the best preservation strategy an area can be given. It is quite common that national parks are surrounded by nature reserves to protect the park even further. Structures can only be built in the area following quite strict guidelines. A nature reserve is an area protected to preserve wildlife, fauna, flora, and etc. Nature reserves can be owned by private landowners, research facilities, and more, but are often formed by initiative of the county government. To mark an area as a nature reserve, the county government consults with the landowner and proposes a resolution about the nature reserve, which contains purpose, rules, and a care plan. After the negotiation is done, the landowner and the government proceed by signing an agreement. After that, the county government decides whether to establish a nature reserve. Buildings and other type of facilities are allowed in the area as long as the nature is not harmed in any way. But authorities cannot force companies or inhabitants to leave the premises just because it is a nature reserve. The Dammtorp and Söderby lakes are both under relatively strong protection of Natura 2000. Despite the protection, there are still a bunch of things that poses as a threat to the area. Some important parts of the area are the naturally eutrophic lakes that contain a lot of beautiful and important vegetation. A threat to these species are if the inflow of water from the Älta River or the Nacka Brook would end or decrease, which means that the water level variation would decrease. Another thing that poses as a threat to the area is an excess supply of nutrients and pesticides coming from the nearby golf course, causing over-fertilization. This can upset the balance in the underwater plant community and have the consequence that unwanted species spread at the expense of others. Our threat are muddy water when cleaning the Älta River, garbage disposal in the nature, planting of inappropriate species of fish, and a careless felling of beachfront forest areas, which can also result in a clouding of the water. These things all pose as a threat to the naturally eutrophic lakes. The silicate slope is a beautiful area as mentioned earlier, so naturally it attracts a lot of young people looking to have a good time. Although this may seem quite innocent, it is a big threat towards the silicate slope. When people decide to enjoy themselves on the silicate slope, fires are often used to make a grill or a campfire, and a lot of trash is left in the area. Using fire is very bad for the mountains, as it tends to make cracks, and leaving trash out is bad, because it looks bad and because it is a threat to the animals living there. Profit interest is also a threat to the structures, functions, and the composition of the species of the habitat type. Intensive outdoor recreation leads to the wearing of the mountain and disturbance. Rock climbing, for an example, can have the same negative effect as an interest in profit.
Well, isn't this place beautiful? We should all be thankful to have the opportunity of being here at the Söderbysjön and see all these unique species. We all should take responsibility to preserve the species-rich silicate slope and natural eutrophic lakes so that even our grandchildren in maybe like 70 years or something can enjoy a walk around the water or have a picnic at the mountaintop. Because if we don't respect the nature, if we put up campfires and leave trash behind, it might not even matter how much hard work the landowners are putting in to preserve the Söderbysjön. If we don't take our responsibility, habitats of fragile species will be destroyed, and they might disappear. So bring your friends, sit down on the top of the mountain and enjoy the beautiful view, but do it with consciousness. Natura 2000 areas, like Söderbysjön, they are supposed to be surroundings where nature can flourish hand in hand with human activities. But if that is going to work, we need to respect the nature.